Okay, so as I said, welcome everyone. Thank you for being here. So today is TSLIP's Anti-Racism Professional Development Workshop titled Advocacy for All, Connecting to Action. So the session will be from 1 to 2:30 today. And this workshop today is a part of the Toronto South Local Immigration Partnerships, TSLIP for short, and it's a part of our workshop series for the newcomer serving sector that focuses on various aspects of anti-racism. So this workshop particularly seeks to expand on previous TSLIP trainings on power and privilege through activities designed to help participants understand their individual power and potential to dismantle systems of oppression. With an emphasis on solidarity and pathways for collective action, this workshop seeks to provide tools and resources to build confidence in service providers. So today we are joined by a wonderful speaker. Her name is Brie Berry Crossfield, and I'll be reading her bio and then pass it on to her so she can take it on from there. So Brie Berry Crossfield, who uses she, her pronouns, is a Jamaican Canadian writer, communications specialist, and educator based in Toronto. She holds her BA in Communication Studies and a Women and Gender Studies from Wilfrid Laurier University and a Master's of Education in Social Justice Education from the University of Toronto. Passionate for change and building up the next generation, Brie has represented youth across the country, advocating to transform the social, cultural, and political landscape in Canada. Throughout her time in various roles within higher education, nonprofit organizations, and grassroots movements, she has been dedicated to embedding the principles and practices of diversity, equity, and inclusion through research, campaigns, and events. Most recently, as the first Black executive director of the University of Toronto's Graduate Students' Union, Brie led the transition to a new governance and organizational structure, including the implementation of an equity officer and allotment of over $500,000 towards bursaries for students from historically marginalized communities. Through meaningful commitment to the belief that there is always a possibility for changing the world as we know it, Brie remains a tireless advocate for the rights of others. Now, as a consultant, Brie seeks to share knowledge and provide resources to support organizations building towards a new kind of future. And so with that, I pass it on to Brie, and I'm so looking forward to this session. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. I'm so excited to chat with you today, and thank you to TSLIP for inviting me. So today's workshop is Advocacy for All, Connecting to Action. And the theme that I like to present to folks before doing any of my workshops is that principle takes practice. And if there's nothing else that you learned from me today, I want you to take that phrase with you. It's important for us to take what we learn in trainings and workshops and figure out how to apply them to our daily lives, because at least in my opinion, making these changes can't or shouldn't take place overnight. Embodying and enacting anti-oppression principles in our everyday lives is hard work, because it's hard work, right? So you folks work in newcomer services, you know the work that you do is largely hard work. We have to stay committed to that hard work and committed to envisioning new ways of life, but we don't do that without putting it in practice, right? So I'm not going to reiterate my bio, but hello everyone again, I'm Brie. I'm really excited to talk to you today, and I'm going to run you through first our agenda. So we're going to start with a welcome and overview. We're going to do a land acknowledgement where I'll invite you just to do a brief project, just to warm everybody up. One thing about me and my style in terms of facilitations is I really do encourage participation from everybody. The thing about being virtual versus in person is that I can't always read the room, to put it in one way. So it really does benefit myself and benefits you as well when you do participate with me. That way I can ensure that folks are, picking up what I'm putting down. So as we continue, I'm going to give you a very brief overview on power and privilege. And then we're going to start moving more into talking about leveraging your power, as well as going through the social change ecosystem map, solidarity and collective action. And we're going to conclude with an activity for visioning for change. So how this is going to go is I'm going to talk for quite a bit in the first little bit and towards the end, you folks will have we'll start doing more activities, and you folks, of course, are free to use the chat throughout or raise your hand if needed. So our land acknowledgement today, Toronto is on the traditional territories of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit River, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples. This place is now home to many First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people. It is also home to a diverse population of people, including settlers, immigrants, and refugees. It is our duty to honor the treaties of the territories we live in and work with the original stewards of this land in good faith to care for this land we now share. Toronto is covered by Treaty 13 with the Mississaugas of the Credit River. And before we jump into introductions, I would invite everybody to take about 5 minutes here to visit this website. I'm going to drop it in the chat for everybody. Recognizing that some of us are from here, some of us are not from here, and some of us are from everywhere, I invite you to go to this website and find either your hometown or current location. Once you're able to find it, you feel free to share it in the chat. So I'm going to give everybody about 5-ish minutes here. And while you folks are toggling around on native land, yes, I see someone in the chat has used it before. That's awesome. This is personally one of my favorite tools. Is I understood what treaties were, but I didn't recognize that not all treaties were numbered. Some of them are named, for example. I grew up in Pickering, Ontario, which is covered by a Williams Treaty. It's not a numbered treaty, but I have friends, for example, who are from the prairies who are covered by Treaty 1 or Treaty 3. I always find it so interesting, and I definitely invite you folks, if you are able to find your treaty, to look it up and look what it says inside and see where you can join the calls for reconciliation. All right, I see someone from North Bay, Anishinaabe territory, traditional lands of the Nipissing and Dokies, I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, First Nations, Robinson-Huron Treaty of 1850. Thank you. Does anyone else have one they would like to drop into the chat? All right. I see Jasper, Alberta, Treaty 6 and 8. Wow, already you folks are Maple Ridge, BC. All right, our Treaty 1 territory, there we go. All right, I'm gonna do one last call, so one last minute here to drop your treaty or territory into the chat. I see Treaty 18. Wow, Lake Simcoe, Natawasega. I've made it a goal of mine this year to learn how to pronounce some of these names a lot better. I'm a very literal reader, and I realize sometimes my pronunciation is not accurate, but that is a goal for myself this year. So thank you folks for participating. I'm going to move on, but if you would like to keep dropping your treaty in the chat or your hometown, that would be great. So here are some of my house rules for today, for our workshop today. Speaking only for yourself, using I statements, of course, being mindful of language. I always say don't get super concerned about using the right words. I understand language changes quite frequent, changes constantly. And if you're unsure of what the right phrasing is to use, just ask, and we can all work through it together. Lean into discomfort. I always remind folks that even if I'm talking generally, I'm not talking about you as individuals. Even if I use the word you, I'm not calling out anybody in particular in these workshop spaces. And I would ask that, of course, if folks do feel uncomfortable, to ask why. Ask yourself, what is bothering me right now? Why is it bothering me? Lean into that, because often that is showing us a place where we need to make changes, right? Commit to creating safer spaces. I'm not expecting any issues today, of course, but I will reserve the right to remove you from the workshop if you are disruptive or make other folks unable to participate comfortably in the space. And our last two, of course, is just to use the raise hand function or indicate if you need to use the chat. I ask that folks, unless it's absolutely necessary, not interrupt me when I'm speaking. If I lose my train of thought, I'm not getting it back. And finally, video on, of course, is optional, but it is preferred, as I mentioned already. Doing these kinds of workshops in person or virtually is different than doing them in person. I can't read your expressions. I can't read your body language. So I would invite folks, even if you don't want it on all the time, to just flip on and off so I can see your lovely faces. And right now is your turn to introduce yourselves. You are welcome to use either the chat or the raise hand function to introduce yourself verbally. I would like everyone to share with me your name, your pronouns, if you have any access needs. So for example, if, hey, Brie, I need to turn my camera off sometimes so I can stand. I may need a stretch break. I am going to try and find some time to give folks a minute, a brief lifestyle break during this workshop. And of course, one thing that you're passionate about. So Duba, Center of Victims of Torture, passionate about marginalized youth. Is it Sudaba or Sudaba? Am I pronouncing it correctly? Sudaba, okay.
Yes.
Thank you.
Hi.
Hi. I can see some faces that look like they're writing in the chat. I see a raised hand. Julie.
Hi there. My name is Julie Van Berkel. I use she, her pronouns. And I am passionate about immigration to Canada and living up to sort of the overseas marketing that we have internationally as a multicultural, accepting, welcoming country, and trying to actually make that a reality or the truth in Canada. So sort of passionate about creating welcoming communities here in Canada. Thank you.
Thank you, Julie. Lisa, I see your hand as well.
Yes, and I just want to make sure that mute is off. Hi, everybody. My name is Lisa Trudell, and I'm a career specialist with Achieve, which is a career center in downtown Toronto, where we help Canadian citizens, permanent residents, and LGBTQ refugees. And that is definitely my passion, is to provide as much employment preparation assistance to our refugees in the LGBTQ+ community.
Thank you, Lisa. I see some other names. Hi, Jess. I see that it's okay if your camera's not functioning today. Thank you for putting in the chat. Hello, CJ. Yep, can't sit still. I understand that. So I will definitely try and give folks a break, some time to take a break. Is it Chengiz? Chengiz? Okay. Thank you. Hello, Leanne. Hi, I see Lauren, your hand. Oh. Unfortunately, Lauren, for some reason, the volume is not working. I can't hear you. I don't know if.
Let's see now. There we go. My name is Lauren. I have my pronouns are she and her, and I'm with the Toronto West Local Immigration Partnership. And I will be largely off camera today because, as you have just seen, I am on an interim laptop with work, and it seems to be very sketchy. So but I'm really looking forward to hearing your presentation. And I'm passionate about building community through traditional and non-traditional ways, especially through art making and placemaking.
Thank you, Lauren. I see Leanne, passionate about relationship building with newcomers. Madeline, passionate about supporting youth and preventing homelessness and exiting out of homelessness. I love to see what people are passionate about because I can already see so many of the connections that have brought you to the places that you're at. So I'm going to do a final call for introductions. Please feel free to raise your hand or throw it in the chat, and we'll move on from here. Ifoma?
Yes, my name is Ifoma, and I'm joining from Siemens. So yeah, one thing I'm passionate about is creating welcoming communities. Yeah. So that's all.
Thank you. I'm just running down the list here. I think we've gotten, almost everybody. But if not, again, please feel free to drop your information in the chat. And we're going to move on to the meat and potatoes of some of the things that we're talking about today. So as I understand it, folks have been doing quite a few workshops recently, talking a lot about what power, privilege, white supremacy, racism, and how that operates within the newcomer sector. So often we talk about power in absolutes, right? So we often see power as most represented as one of the first two elements. So this resource here is directly from the Canadian Council for Refugees. It's one of my favorites to talk through because I think it really highlights how power, as much as it seems like this scary big thing that, power is like the cloud, like it only exists up here. It's not something you can see or hold. It is something you can see or hold. When we think of personal power, a great example of personal power would be Justin Trudeau, back when he was first running for prime minister. I think we all remember the news outlets saying that, Justin, he's so charming. He's so funny. He's so young in comparison to other prime ministers. And that was a use of personal power. He was also what we call now a Nepo baby, the son of a former prime minister. He carried a lot of personal power as he was entering his race, right? Then there's also the institutional and organizational power, which is often what we find ourselves butting up against the most, whether it's in our workplaces, whether it's in schools, whether it's in a bank or the TTC, for example. They are derived, and those powers are derived from our position, our mandate, what resources we have, seniority in an organization. So as you know, we work in our workplaces, your president has more power than you as a coordinator or an administrator. Your manager has more power than you, than a volunteer. And often those are the power structures that we are trying to undo, because those are the power structures that impact, those elements of power are what impact us the most. So collective power is often our only tool, correct, for response against power that seeks to oppress or marginalize communities. This is always the goal of what we're trying to build, right? We're always trying to build the collective. We're trying to build a community. We are trying to build power and resources within ourselves, rather than relying on systems that may actually harm us or remove these resources from us. And then finally, of course, the elements of social power, which is derived from our social identity. But of course, we can also think of social power as privilege, which will lead into my next slide. And you may have seen this image before. It is also from the Canadian Council of Refugees. I would urge you, if you have never looked at their website, to check out some of their resources. They do have a plethora of things to look through. I'm a big fan of visuals, so I always like to have visuals like this. I find it really helps folks to see what we're talking about. So if we're thinking of privilege at the center and those closest to the center, we know what that looks like, right? In places like Canada, it looks like being white. It looks like being a man. It looks like being a citizen. It looks like being English speaking, having a high level job, being highly educated, able-bodied, straight, being in, well, now they consider it your middle years, but I think with the upheaval of generations and the current recession that we're in, I'm not even sure if this is a privilege anymore, because you know what, at any age, we're not doing okay. So maybe this has to be revamped, revisited, but I think it still stands as a great tool, as privilege is often a result of power, right? And when we talk about privilege, privilege is often mistaken for merit. It presumes that if you work hard, that is going to be the absolute deterrent in a person's ability to access power, which, yeah, for the most part, if you're already close to this inner circle, right? If you're already in the circle and you put in a little bit of effort, you should be okay. But if you're outside of this circle, sometimes no matter how, sometimes working hard may get you into better results, but sometimes it doesn't. And of course, it is a state of being, right? Privilege is often something we talk about giving away, something we can share. But privilege is also something that isn't as fixed as we want it to be, right? It can shift. You know, many of us think we can be privileged because we grew up, for example, if you grew up in an upper middle class home, you would have class privilege. But then as a child and maybe as an adult, even though despite growing up with all that class privilege, you, for whatever reason, you got injured on a job, you had to take care of a sick relative, you are now in poverty. Is it still a privilege to have been raised up? Sure it is. You have some skill, you may have some social capital you may be able to pull from, but also that privilege can shift, right? You can lose. Sometimes you are able to lose those privileges. And that also is based through positionality. It's a concept introduced first by Linda Alcoff, talking about how gender, race, and all these aspects of our identity, of our social identities, are not fixed positions, they're given qualities. And that means things like where you grew up, at what point in time you grew up there, and what was taught to you as personal views and values influences how you understand the world around you, right? So if you grew up, we'll go back even to that conversation around class and race. So if you grew up middle class, if you grew up as a white person in a middle class suburb where you had access to nice schools, decent high schools, and were able to easily access higher education, that is going to influence how you look at the, oh, sorry, I see some comments here. I'm just double checking. Is my audio okay, folks? Sometimes my speakers or my headphones are a little off. I'm just going to do a quick check. I can see any thumbs up. Okay. Yes. Okay. Sorry, I got a note. And what is elderly? Yeah, I don't know what elderly is anymore, because last I checked, elderly folks were supposed to be allowed to retire at the very least, and that's not happening. So we can keep moving from to circle back to what I was talking about here. So as I mentioned, if you were white and grew up in Canada in an upper middle class household, your journey may look a lot different than someone, for example, who's a child of immigrants who may have grown up lower middle class who may have not had access to education because their families didn't grow up here, or who had to take out student loans to access that education because their family wasn't able to pay for it. Yes, I see Sudaba has also mentioned things like pretty privilege, yes, especially when we talk about women, this pressure to be beautiful and look presented all the time. As you can see here, I've come to this workshop with a little bit of a lipstick on, a little bit of blush, in the hopes that if it looks like I take care of myself, you will take me more seriously than if I came to you with a top knot, no makeup on, and my usual sweatpants when I'm not in front of a screen. And of course, folks should be familiar with intersectionality because it explores how race, gender, class, they create these overlapping and interdependent systems of discrimination or advantage. And what I often say in talking about intersectionality for myself is that the racism that I experience is sexist and the sexism I experience is racist. There's no in between for me. There's no, oh, like, I don't think it was really racist, Brie, it was just really misogynistic. No, it was both. That's why we have this term also that you may be familiar with in anti-racism called misogynoir, which talks about the specific sexism, that specific line of sexism and racism that Black women face. So of course, here I am inundating you with information because when the purpose of today is to talk about the work, right? We want to know how to do the work. How do I do this, Brie? How do I go outside of not just my job, but go into my communities and do this work? And this is often how we want the work to look, right? We're human beings, we're a very linear people, right? We want to see the beginning, the middle, and the end. We want the line. We want to start at here. X group of people are being oppressed by an institution of power for whatever reason. Let's say it's racism, let's say it's sexism, let's say it's misogyny, or in your case, it is xenophobia. We don't want more immigrants from these countries. We don't want more Muslims. We don't want more Asians. We don't want more Black people in this country because that is what's making Canada less great. So this group of people, they come together with their community, they come together with allies, and they say, this isn't right. We need to change. Things must be changed. People get together. And often what this looks like for many people at its most easy level is we think protest, right? We think, oh, these people we get out into the street, we protest, we wave our signs, we wave our banners, and we demand change. We stop business as usual to have folks pay attention. And then from there, we move into the institution of power hears the collective voice of the people and moves to implement changes that will address the issues brought forward for the benefit of all. That is always what the goal is, right? We want for the benefit of all. And that ending point where we did it, we changed the world. And isn't this amazing? Isn't it so great that everything is better now we've fixed it? And of course, we know that that's often not what the work looks like. This is how the work really looks. It is a constant overlap. And in the chat here, one moment. I apologize, folks. Apparently my fire alarm is testing. So I'm going to invite everybody for the next few moments in the chat to share some issues that you think are connected to newcomer services and how do you find that they connect to issues outside of your work in newcomer services? Because of course there are no singular solutions because there is no singular issue. So I see one suggestion here through the chat, housing instability and how employers will judge you on your postal codes. Yes, that's a big one. Houses for families that are large, more than 4 people, is extremely difficult to access for newcomers. Yes, absolutely. Are folks able to think through any other issues? I think education is a good one for newcomer services. If you've been in the country longer and you have your permanent residency and you're on your path to citizenship, you have access to paying domestic fees. But if you don't, you're an international student, which means you're paying 3 times as much as everybody else. Yes, after school recreational activities that poor people could afford. Youth who are newcomers have an added barrier to accessing housing. There's an ongoing fixation on Canadian experience on a resume. Yes, that's a huge one. We all know that the myth of the engineer cab driver is not a myth as much as it is very much fact. Access to feasible employment, yes, and skills development, yes. Are folks able to think through anything else? What about greater understanding, especially systemically, of intersectionality? We have so much niche programming, but rarely do we cross streams. So, for example, queer newcomers may not feel comfortable in either newcomer or queer spaces. Thank you for providing that point, CJ, and you are correct. This issue, but I see some folks have also dropped additional comments. Access to services, most are restricted to permanent residents or convention refugees. Yes, so thank you everybody for your patience. Thank you for also participating. Jails, prisons are not rehabilitative. In fact, they are the opposite. So you folks, I don't even know why I'm here, to be completely honest. Y'all seem like a great group of experts already. Great group of thinkers already. International students and migrant workers need inclusion and supports, absolutely. Every year, Justice for Migrant Workers are reminding us that there are people who exist in this country who we are not supposed to think about at all. They pick our food, they take care of us, they take care of the land that we are also responsible for taking care of, and then we send them home with a paltry paycheck and nothing else. And that is often something that we need to start integrating more, because of course, the only difference between myself and a migrant worker is my status. Other than that, there's no difference between us. If they're coming from Jamaica, my family's from Jamaica, we're the same person, just a different pathway that we were able to access this country. So thank you folks for participating. And we're gonna we're gonna get a little bit more here into leveraging your power. So of course, when we're talking about how to leverage that social power, that collective power, that personal power to get folks to move, to do the things that you want to do, to participate in action. I want to start that because many of us get fixated that change has to occur in that linear fashion, right? We find ourselves disappointed and disillusioned with the work that has been done. We tend to think that it's never been enough. It's not going to be enough. However, I would argue that revolutions happen every day, and they're big and small. And when we're afraid to speak back to power because it feels like things will never change, then we have already determined our future. As you can see here, I've dropped a few key points to think through when trying to leverage your power. Of course, starting with listening to those around you and ensure that you prioritize those most impacted. So over the last several years, we've seen, particularly in the United States and Canada, the uprise of Black folks coming together during the pandemic. In particular, this resurgence of saying we need support. Black people are dying, and we're not only dying from COVID, we are dying by the hands of the police. We are being over-policed, we are essential workers, and we are not getting any support. We are being left out to dry. And when these things happen, who is the community that you have to listen to? Of course, you have to listen to Black folks who are saying, this is what's happening to us. And how do you prioritize helping those folks who say, this is what's happening to us? Solidarity can feel complicated, but there are multiple ways to show up, and that's something that we're going to talk and walk through today. Finding people who find, and this is important as well, find people you trust to hold you accountable, but also support your well-being. This can be very tiring work. It can kind of feel like you're constantly butting up against the wall of trying to make change, of trying to create equity, of trying to reduce those barriers, and yet you can't do it. And yet you find yourself sometimes losing the plot, maybe because you're tired, you're overworked, you're burnt out, your ego starts to come into play, and you're not doing things for the benefit of the community, but for the benefit of yourself, or you're not able to participate because you've been so burnt out that now you can't even think about signing another petition, for example. So finding people around you who can encourage you to keep going, who can also call you out if they're saying, hey, you're doing a little bit too much, or hey, maybe this isn't the steps that we need to be taking to solve this issue or to support these folks. Identifying your networks and resources is helpful because you have more resources and more networks than you can possibly believe. You know more people than you think you know. And of course, preparing for disappointment, but not losing hope. As I've said, change can feel like it's never happening. All of these small little things don't feel like it's enough. It doesn't feel like it's enough, but I want to advise folks that hope is the most radical tool that you can have. When we lose hope is when we start to feel that we are losing. So I would encourage you to think through what makes you feel hopeful. And if you have any examples here, I would be happy to chat for you to throw them into the chat. So for myself, for example, watching the protests taking place in Iran over the last several months, and seeing these women who are on the front lines fighting for their rights, fighting for their ability to exist the way that they want to, that gives me hope, because that tells me that that even in the face of some of the worst consequences, there are some of us who are still willing to stick our necks out there and say, I will do what it takes to ensure that future generations will not have to know what this life looks like. And now I would also invite you, is there any things, interests, inspirations, or hope, things that give you hope? And you're free to raise your hand or drop it into the chat. Yes, youth engagement and passion in social justice. Yes. Can folks think of anything else that gives them hope? It doesn't have to be big. It can be small. Elementary school kids who did a walkout in the States last week. Yes, terrible and amazing. Yeah, Gen Alpha is really, they're coming through the gate. Thank you. For the changes I have witnessed over my lifetime gives me hope and delight. You are absolutely right. Things do change. I remember when you couldn't even use the word anti-Black racism without somebody being like, no, isn't it just regular racism? And why do Black people have to have a special kind of racism for themselves? And I don't understand why why we have to use this term. So now it's become, well, yeah, when we're talking about Black folks and racism, we're talking about specific racism and anti-Black racism that is very specific to the experiences of people, to Black people of African descent. That is a small change. I was a radical in 1990 because I dared to call myself a lesbian. And now, look at us, lesbians everywhere. Thank you so much, folks. We're gonna keep it pushing now to talk a little bit about solidarity. And these are some key things to consider here. Action is good. Move with those impacted. You don't have to be an expert in the issues to show up. Often folks feel uncomfortable because they say, well, Brie, I would like to come, but like, I don't know like a lot of details of like what's happening or like why it's happening. Well, come to the protest, and you know, you can learn things by talking to people. You don't have to be the expert. If you're not the person at the front line, if you're not the primary organizer, if you're not on the mic, you don't have to be the expert. You just have to care enough to show up, right? And you can learn as you go. Even when you think you're the expert, right? We find ourselves learning. I learn more and more about anti-racism work every day, and I've been doing this for nearly a decade now. So we learn as we grow, right? Doing nothing can be solidarity if it prevents harm or has been requested of you. And this is why I say it's important for you to have folks around you who can keep you accountable, because sometimes our desire to do something, to act, to give more, brings more difficulty to the folks trying to do something than what they've asked for. So for example, I've used, I spoke about how the women of Iran inspire me. But for myself, I don't speak Arabic or read Arabic, and most of my sources are translated. So often what I've chosen to do is not share information directly to my social media because I can't verify that information. And I know my voice has an impact, and I don't want to share it. I want to avoid sharing this information that could harm those women. But do I sign petitions? Yes. Do I reach out to folks that I know in the Iranian community who can make suggestions on what I could do? Yes. During International Women's Day in Toronto this year, there was a coalition of women who were asking folks to write notes, solidarity notes to the women of Iran on pieces. There were pieces of fabric, small squares like this, that they were going to mail. So even that is a simple gesture of saying, we see you, we love you, we support you. And finally, when thinking through solidarity, likability should not be the primary justification for solidarity. We see this happen a lot in our politics, right? We pick the people we like. We pick the people we think are most like them. Language of Iran is not Arabic and Iranians are not Arab. Thank you, Chengiz. You're right. I apologize. That is my mistake then. Oh, you are right. It is. Would you want to correct me and tell? So this is like a proper record for the correction. It is Farsi, or is it Persian?
It is Farsi or Persian, yes.
Farsi or Persian. I apologize for that mistake, but the point that I'm making is, of course, the point that I don't speak any of those languages or read any of them. So I'm not familiar enough with them to be able to always trust that the information I get is accurate to what the people on the ground would want us to know. And finally, as I said, the issues we're facing can't be tasked to any one individual. And if you have to feel deeply connected to a person to support the causes that they're working on, I would invite you to consider how that may limit your perceptions moving forward. It's easy sometimes to think that like everybody has to be like that. Rather, sorry, let me pull back here. The point I'm trying to make is often when we think of organizers, when we think of people trying to make change, we want them to, of course, be great examples, great role models of how it is to be, how it is to adopt a new world, to adopt a new model. We want them to be kind, we want them to be caring, we want them to be understanding, but we have to remember that people are people. And sometimes you may really respect those people because they're doing a lot of great work, and it's okay if you don't really like them. If they're not somebody you want to be best friends with, that's fine, as long as you can figure out ways to work together. So we are coming up onto the halfway mark here now. It is 1:51. I'm going to give everybody a 5-minute break, or a 5-minute lifestyle break. So for folks who would like to get up and stretch, feel free. For folks who want to use the bathroom, feel free. Normally I would try and play music, but my Zoom hates me. So I won't be able to do that, but I will give a 1-minute call to invite everybody to come back. I'll see you folks in about 5 minutes. All right, 2 seconds. Inviting everybody back. So we're going to move into some of the activity portion for the final activity for today. So more thoughts to think through. I'm a big thinker, as you can tell, as you can probably guys from my presentations here. Doing the work also looks like managing conflict, right? So it's important to determine for yourself how you want to be able to respond and think critically through a situation that's presented to you. I'm sure this is something common for you folks. You are in newcomer services, you are working with across service provision needs for folks, whether that is looking at youth homelessness, LGBTQIA folks, refugees. Everybody's playing different roles and doing their parts. So, you know, while we can have standards, these are just some steps to think through the situation, right? So you always have the option to continue to observe and not intervene, but there may be times where you are required to say something and you will be asked to address things right there and then. So here's some ways to think through it. When you're evaluating, do you know the history and context of what's happening? Can you assess what is the likelihood of harm? Is this person going to harm themselves? Are they going to harm others? Are they going to be is their presence going to be negative to impact other people? Is there a risk that you have not yet considered when thinking through the risks? When you're determining your outcomes, are you going to call this person out or call them in? Many folks have debated the merits of both. I think they both carry merit. Sometimes no, but sometimes hard heads must feel. If that makes to paraphrase, meaning that sometimes in order to get people to listen to you, and we see this all the time with our politicians, you have to call them out. You have to embarrass them. You have to put them in a position where they can't do anything but respond. And then sometimes the appropriate answer is to call in, right? Speak to your friend one-on-one, say, hey, that thing you said was a little bit racist, and I want to talk you through it because I don't think that that was the intention of what you were trying to say, but I want you to understand how other people may receive what you're saying. Determine that line as well between empathy and accountability. Some people just need a little bit of a gentler hand, and there's some folks you got to be like, no, nah, that's not how it works. Nope, you're not correct. Nope, that's not how this actually goes. Nope, that information is not accurate. And figure out what that line looks like. Reaching out to known relations or elders if you're unsure. If you don't know what to do, reach out to folks who may know what to do. This is why we have communities, right? This is why we have collectives. This is why we want networks around us. And even asking yourself with resources, when you're providing resources, am I capable of providing appropriate support? What could help resolve the issue? Who in my networks could help? Who does my network know? As I said, you know way more people than you think you know. There's always somebody who knows somebody else. And finally, how to take action. So I've broken this down into some suggestions that can be looked at as virtual actions, hybrid actions you can take, and in-person actions you can take. This is not an exhaustive list. And as we go through, I would invite folks to drop in the chat or answer verbally if there's anything else you would like to add to this list, because you can take action in many different ways, right? There's more to creating social change than just, I say get to the protest, but if you can't, you can email your local politicians. A really effective thing actually is not even to don't bother with Stephen Lecce. Go after his staff. Make them annoyed and uncomfortable and inundated with all of your calls and requests, so they have no choice but to go to Stephen Lecce and say, the people are pissed. You need to do something because now I can't do my job because no one will leave me alone. Write the letters, sign petitions. If you can't participate in virtual actions because you worry about your own security in the job, could you do a phone zap, a text zap? Can you share resources on social media? Can you participate in mutual aid? I always say if you can spare the money now, it will come back later. Offer to drop in, check by on somebody. In the height of the pandemic, when we had mutual aid networks where folks were going to check in on their older or disabled neighbors who couldn't go out to a grocery store. Could you drop groceries for somebody? Could you offer to watch somebody's kids so they can go do the things that they need to do? Could you leave your house as a space where people can store stuff if they need to? Can you send somebody else in your place if you can't show up, if you can't commit? Hey, I can't show up to this meeting tonight. I really want to participate though. However, my homegirl, I can have her come. She's available tonight, so she's gonna come and then she'll catch me up on anything I need to know. Can you join your local committees and coalitions? Host the decompression spaces, offer your home. If you know folks want to create a banner and you have a big living room that they can use their art supplies in, can you offer that living room to them? Can you provide food? Can you be the mom who brings granola bars to the protest and hands them out to all the youth so they don't get hungry while fighting for justice? I would invite again, I haven't seen any chatter in the chat yet, but if folks have any other suggestions, any ideas, Unionize, contribute to community pantries, shop with your morals, absolutely. Especially small businesses. Listen, at the end of the day, at this point, even the cheap stores are now expensive. I didn't know Dollarama became $5 Like I know often it's hard to shop local because it feels like it's more expensive. It's not the same. It may not work as well for your budget, but see where you can, right? Any other suggestions? Again, I'm open to verbal suggestions or into the chat. All right. So I'm going to move on here. So this is the social change ecosystem map, and this will be the basis of our final activity today. This framework was developed by Deepa Iyer to help individuals, networks, and organizations align and determine their social change values, individual roles, and the broader ecosystem. So often when we talk about taking action, I think you've even seen it when I'm speaking, we often think about the frontline organizer, right? The frontline responder, the person on the mic, the fist in the air, the person who is speaking to the crowd, rallying people, getting them energized. And we say, well, Brie, I want to participate, but like, I'm not that girl. I'm not that person. I don't want to do, like, how can I do this? And this has been one of my favorite resources to bring through because it shows us that, of course, you need more than just one kind of person to be able to make change, right? And so today I will invite you to review. We're going to review the roles and descriptions and answer the following. I am a blank, but I would like to be a blank. I need a blank, and I would work well with a blank. This is just to show some of your own, for you to be able to assess your own strengths, your flaws, weak points. And these are not static roles you can change. This is just to help you determine your methods of engagement with others as you carry out your work. And this will also be important into our final activity, which will be some scenarios. So here are the descriptions. I'm going to drop the line in the chat for you folks, and I'm going to invite you to take the next 5 to 7 minutes to read over the descriptions and do what you can, and fill out the following sentence. And I see Sudhava also put in as an example of other things that folks can do to take action is interact with people you don't usually get to know. You don't usually get to know them, their culture, their morals, etc. I think that's a great lead into this. So for example, I see myself as a builder and I would like to be a weaver. I need visionaries and I work well with experimenters. And again, when folks feel ready, I will invite you either to drop it into the chat or share verbally. I see, Jess. I am a storyteller, but I would like to be a disruptor. I need builders and I work well with healers. Thank you. And folks, I would definitely invite you, if you're seeing folks who are identifying as things that you think you need, connect with each other. This is a great opportunity. You're working across you're working in similar fields. No.
Maybe the fire alarm will give some folks, or give folks some more time to come up with some answers, right? Yeah.
Honestly, this workshop is just starting to feel like one very large blooper reel. As I get going, the fire alarm starts.
It's just background noise at this point, but you're doing great.
I see some weavers who would like to be builders, some storytellers who would like to be weavers, frontline responders, storytellers. Again, I would heavily encourage that you folks message each other on the chat. Say, hey, would you like to connect after this session? So you can work through the ways that you would like to work, so you can figure out ways that you can work together to support your issues. Yes, I see. Rosetta, I think I take different roles in different setups and I appreciate all the different people around. Yes, definitely. See a daydreamer, but I would like to be a healer. I need good energy and work well with positivity. I'm a weaver, but I would like to be a caregiver. I need a disruptor and I work well with visionaries and storytellers. Another, I see myself as a healer. I would like to be a visionary. I need builders and I work well with caregivers. I'm a builder, but I would like to be an experimenter. I need a disruptor and would work well with a visionary. And this is you folks organizing yourselves, right? This is you folks taking account of what your resources look like, what your individual capacities can look like. And now you have the opportunity to figure out, well, maybe this is how I can respond. Think through now, this is how I, in my role, can respond. Yes, daydreaming is basically visioning. Yes, you are correct. All right. And we are going to conclude today's activities. I am going to invite you folks thinking about the role that you see for yourself in this social change map. We are going to run through a handful of scenarios and while thinking through the role that you've seen for yourself, you can respond how you would participate as a builder, as a weaver, as a storyteller. I want to make sure, one moment here, that I have the correct link ready for you, as we're going to throw it all together into a Jamboard. So I invite everybody. Here is the first scenario. Are folks able to access that link okay? Oh, I'm seeing requests for access already. Give me one moment here. As the permissions were open, but sometimes. Okay. Drop the link in here. All right, I dropped the link in again. say anyone, yeah, you folks, everybody should be able to join on now. I'm seeing some head nods, so folks are able to jump on. And I'm going to go back to sharing my screen here. Oh. So here's our first scenario. Folks can see my screen okay. So here's an example. Justice for Migrant Workers is hosting a Status for All rally. The organizers are reporting that conditions for workers on a farm in Ontario have gotten worse, and one worker is now critically injured. They want to send that worker back to Jamaica without medical attention or even payment for their time. Unfortunately, you are not able to attend the rally in person as you're taking care of a sick relative and you don't want to spread their sickness to anyone else. How can you, in your role, participate? And I invite folks to use the stickies here and just throw it in whatever they think. So take a sticky note. And throw it on the screen. Are there still some folks having issues accessing the link? I'm seeing a couple notifications for a share request.
Or access to edit it. It's only coming up as view only.
Let me try this again. Because I changed the settings. Everybody should be able to. Oopsies. Oh. All right, last attempt, folks. Last attempt. That should work now. There we go. Success. All right. So for folks, I'm going to add, I see a suggestion here. So connect with a builder. Thank you, Lisa. So something like that. Create signage for the rally, yes. Seeing as a storyteller, I would spread the word to my networks and to try and raise awareness of the situation. Hopefully action can be taken. Write to local authorities, donate money to for the medical expenses. Go to social media or mass media in general. Spread information beforehand and follow up with how it went. Connect with networks to mobilize attendees and action. Awesome. All right, I'm going to do final call. Moving on to the next scenario here. Talk about these injustices with your friends and family, spread awareness. Thank you, everybody. I'm going to encourage us now to move to the Weaver, identifying the agencies and authorities that have leverage for the issue and share that information. All right, folks, once the jam board started working, we really started jamming. Okay. All right, I'm going to do a final call for stickies before moving to the next slide here. 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. Let's move now here into scenario B. Just to make this easier so I don't have to toggle the screen, I'm just going to put it here so everybody is able to see it. So you are attending an event with some colleagues and you've been brought into a conversation about immigration with another attendee. You mentioned to this person that you work in newcomer services, which appears to trigger some anger. The person begins to vent that Canada was great before all these immigrants started coming in here with their Sharia laws, turning us into a third world country. And why do you even work there? There are actual Canadians who need your help. You don't know this person well enough to understand the context of why they feel this way, but it's clear they may not be open to hearing your perspective. How do you respond? Or how can you respond? And for folks to get from the last scenario to this one, just the next frame up at the top here. I'll try and make this larger so it's less of a strain on the eyes. So for myself, I would say so this is mine. Due to the nature of this workshop, I'm not going to encourage violence or fighting. I know for some folks, your first response may be, I want to fight, but not every instance calls for that. So my suggestion would be saying, I'm going to just disagree with you. Hope you have a nice day and leave. I don't see a reason to entertain speaking to this person. I don't know them well enough. I don't know their people. I see in here, would it be rude to say, do you mean the time when colonization took away almost everything from the natives? Canada was never great, but with love and compassion for one another, God willing, it will be a great country. I think that's a great response. Very classy. Sudaba. I see someone saying a message of love first would kickstart a leveled ground and open them up. Again, I encourage folks, don't think through how you think you should respond. Think through the way you want to be able to respond. Responding with compassion but firmness that their perspective is not shared as a white settler, leveraging that privilege to challenge the intolerant perspective. Amazing. And then they can catch these hands. No fighting. Was it Will.i.am who said no fighting? Or no, that was the Fugees, sorry. No fighting today. Racialized folks, I know this may be a hard conversation to get into, but I think for, especially for those of us who come from quote unquote Christian countries, who are not quote unquote religious minorities, there is a potential here to maybe push back on this idea of saying, well, could you tell me what you mean by Sharia laws? For example, could you expand? Blast the song like Changes by Tupac or Man in the Mirror by Michael Jackson. I would like to respond by challenging on everything, starting with, can you tell me anything about the immigration process? Hey, maybe that's a great place for you folks to start. Can you tell me anything about the immigration? Well, I work in newcomer services. I'd be happy to talk to you about what the immigration process looks like. Do you know what it looks like? I know this is a difficult one as well, and folks you don't have to have the answers. Like, you don't have to have the perfect answer right now, but these are situations that you may run into, right? As I said, principle takes practice. And if you're able to practice your principles now, it will feel easier to do it right away, rather than having to stop and be like, oh no, what do I do? I agreed with others, would disengage from the conversation, but advising that I don't agree. If the individual was more open, I may push back on the comments, but otherwise not worth it. Okay. Could you talk to the organizer of the event and maybe let them know that there is a person here who is maybe making some of the other participants uncomfortable with their conduct? Because I don't know about you, but I don't necessarily want someone yelling at me about immigration, whether or not I agree with their point. Could you ask the organizer of the event to remind everybody that this is that equity and diversity is important to these spaces? The general guidelines, whatever policies on codes of conduct. Doing a final call, we have one last scenario to get through, and I may take you folks over by just 5 minutes if you can hold on with me here. All right, last call for scenarios or for responses. 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. And we're going to switch here to the final slide. Our final scenario today. Which I'm sure is something sorry, I have to leave by 2:30, no problem. A client is struggling to acclimate to their new environment and comes to you looking for additional support. I'm sure this is common for many of you folks. In their home country, they had a house and a good job, but they found that once in Toronto, their qualifications are not good enough for them to work in the field they've trained in. They're worried they made a huge mistake and their family will suffer for it as they were isolated for most of the winter. They also have 2 small children to support and worry that because English isn't their first language, they will not be able to participate in summer activities. What could you do? Yep, there we go. I didn't even have to put it in. Help them find a network to make them feel part of community. Provide some service system navigation. Absolutely. Yeah, I see in the chat here, Lisa suggested provide hope and assist with providing resources and new resume at least. It's about all about providing hope. Exactly. For the children, locating affordable or subsidized summer activities in their communities, particularly ones that are targeted towards either their interest or newcomers. Offer to take them to a newcomer serving agency to meet workers and learn about the supports available to them. Right. Could you put a post up on social media saying, hey, folks, I have a client looking for work in A, B, and C if anyone has leads? Could you offer to start? Could you fundraise to help put their kids in summer school activities? Validate their feelings, encourage the progress they've made and will make, brainstorm actions that can help alleviate these problems. Yes. Are you able to help them practice their English, for example? Outside of work, vote and be involved in community initiatives that support newcomers. You're right, that also helps. All right, folks, trying to keep us under this 5-minute over. So I'm gonna wrap this up in about, we'll give it 10 seconds to be fair. Let's go down from 10, 9, feels even worse, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Thank you. So if possible, connect them with people currently working in their chosen profession to better understand the industry and its barriers. Absolutely. So thank you again, folks, for spending today with me. Given the fire alarm, the audio issues, I appreciate you all for writing this out with me. I strongly encourage everybody to connect with each other if you can, especially now that you know the roles that so many of you get to play. And I am going to lead you here with a quick quote. I don't want to take up any more of folks' time, especially since it's so beautiful outside. I think another word for activism is imagination, because it's about this idea of being able to envision a world that doesn't yet exist. I think that that's what the job of an activist is. It's to be able to create into being or create into existence a new world order that is really equitable and that is really fair and that is just and sustainable. Advocacy is not a luxury, it's a necessity. We advocate for our survival. So I leave you folks with that. Thank you so much for joining me today. I really enjoy getting to meet all of you, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your day. I am happy to stick around and answer any questions, realizing that we ran over and folks didn't get as much time to talk as they may have wanted to, but if not, enjoy. Take care. Thank you.
Thank you, Brie. Yeah, and for folks, you can see it in the chat. We do have our previous workshops there that you can check out on the YouTube link. But thank you so much, Brie, for such a wonderful workshop, even despite all of the hiccups. Thank you. Take care, everyone. Thank you for coming.
Take care, everyone.
dokes. Let me.
All right.